And hello, my name is Ryan Belmore. I'm the owner and publisher of What's Up Noop. Today is October 19th, and we are continuing our conversations with the candidates. And Mr. Frank Brosnich joins me. Frank, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Ryan. Today's a big day.
Today is a big day.
First
Give
day
me
of
one of
early
the many
voting.
reasons why. Early
First
voting.
day of early voting.
It
People
is
can
early
get out.
voting. You visit vote.ri.gov. You can do multiple things there. It is my favorite site this month. You can go on and make sure you're registered to vote and then panic when you're not. You can go on and find where you can early vote. You can go on and find where you can vote on November 8th. And my favorite thing is you can go on and see that sample ballot where anywhere in Rhode Island, you put your home address that you're registered to vote. You're going to see all of the candidates. There are going to be probably, unless you're paying very close attention, some surprises there where you're going to go, I don't know who to choose in this or that race. And you have a couple days or weeks to figure that question out if you prepare yourself. Proper prior planning prevents poor performance.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, you like that? Pull
Yeah,
that up somewhere. But you go on there, and then not more importantly, but also important, is you scroll down, which would be the backside of the ballot. And where you live in Rhode Island, you're going to have 3 statewide questions. So everybody will have those 3. And then in places like Newport, you're going to have you're going to have 10 questions. In Middletown, you're going to have 6 questions. In Portsmouth, you're not going to have any local questions. Go on there, get to know it.
Important, be an informed voter. Don't go there and just say that's a pretty name. I think I'll vote for that person. Or I always vote yes on these referenda. So be informed. Understand what you're voting for.
That's it, and that's what we're doing here today. We have been interviewing candidates all month long. I think we have about 70 on the books this month, and you can go on there, compare, contrast the candidates. You don't have to watch every video. I'm trying to make it a little bit easier.
Wait, hold on a minute. They've got to watch every video.
Well, you can listen to them.
Oh, okay.
We have turned them into podcasts. So if you're on the run, walking around, campaigning, doing whatever you're doing, you can listen to them. You can also catch the latest election news. For example, we just published a story a short while ago where the League of Women Voters of Newport County have canceled their candidate forum for Senate District 11 because the independent candidate as well as a Republican candidate in that race do not want to participate. So if you want to keep up with the election news, head to whatsupnoop.com.
Wait, is that interesting? You know what? I probably would have held that and just had empty seats. That would have said a lot.
They say they are nonpartisan and they don't do empty seats.
That's not partisan. Yeah. They offered the opportunity.
Well, we are moving further down the island from Senate District 11 to Senate District 13, which is Newport and Jamestown, which I finally think I got that right. And she is Senator Dawn Euer. And hi, Dawn.
Hello.
Hi, Dawn.
How many things did I get wrong there?
No, you got it. Newport and Jamestown. I know folks try to add on the other island municipalities, but it's just Newport over here on Aquidneck Island, and then Jamestown across the strait. So
you have one of the easier ones to understand. Talking to Senator Ludapama the other day, and it's where Dunkin' Donuts used to be, to where Benny's used to be, to it's all split up each town. I know it's all based on population.
Well, Jamestown and Newport, it's where the Newport Bridge used to be.
That's it. It feels like forever now, and I'm sure it feels like even further for you, but how many terms have you done now in Senate?
Yeah, so first one in 2017. So this is just my second full term that I'm going to be finishing up and seeking my third full term. So, yeah.
I remember that first election when you ran unendorsed and won fairly handily, I think.
Yeah, it's in many ways it feels like it was yesterday, and also feels so long ago. So we also have that time vortex in the middle of the 2 years of COVID shutdown. So yeah, that kind of warped the time estimation in my mind. I know.
Hey, Dawn, I want to just hit a question real quick off the bat, and we go back a few years now when the island suffered, when Newport suffered that terrible outage where we had so many people who were just left without power, basically. Have we progressed? Is this now we have the safeguards in place, or are we still trying to find a way to make sure that that's not going to happen again?
Yeah, so I think that's like a yes and answer. I mean, this is one of those things where I think the report that came out of the 2019 outage was, gave some pretty clearly defined reasons for that report. Part of it was mismanagement on Grid's part. They didn't have a full understanding of like the scope of the, kind of volume needs at peak events across the gas line. So that was hugely problematic. And my understanding is there's some better checks and balances on that. And then there was kind of that overlap of two like mechanical issues, a valve that froze in Massachusetts and some issues at the LNG terminal in Provport. But I think really where I'm at on that issue, and I think for moving forward, the best thing that we need to do is figure out our transition. As a region, we're wholly over reliant on natural gas, and we put it both in because we put it in both the home heating sector and for our electricity generation. That causes two things. One is it causes issues as far as how much capacity do we have in the pipelines. We have enough capacity, but how fast can that gas flow on those high demand days? And also the cost considerations, because gas is a fuel that's bought and sold on a private market. So essentially, we're competing against ourselves in the marketplace when we're looking to purchase natural gas. We're purchasing it for our home heating needs, and we're purchasing it for electrical needs. So I think in the short term, I'm confident that the oversight and assessment that's been done and some additional communications, things that came out of that 2019 outage, helps us make sure that we're stabilized for the immediate future. But I think long term, we really need to be looking at a transition for all those reasons I just said.
Dawn, you just spoke at an event last night about pretty much all of this energy topic, and you can tie it into that event if you want. But it's been kind of funny. Funny is probably not the right word, but the candidates all in Portsmouth have the Mayflower wind cable on their minds, and in Middletown, Newport, it hasn't been brought up once by any of the candidates. How close are you to that? Watching that, championing for that? What do you know about all the winds happening there?
Yeah, sure. So there is a ton of offshore wind development happening off the coast of Rhode Island, off the New England coast in general. And I think that's going to be hugely important to kind of balance and stabilize our winter energy costs. As you know, we just, that announcement happened recently about the upcoming winter electricity rates. Again, that electricity rate increase is cause of the natural gas cost increases. So that's a direct pass-through cost to us as consumers. And the balance of that to kind of stabilize those costs, getting offshore wind online, the sooner the better, is really going to help stabilize those winter costs. So I've been hugely involved in this. I had the offshore wind legislation to issue to basically have our utility procure additional offshore wind, up to 1,000 megawatts of offshore wind, in an effort to try to send those market signals and stabilize our winter energy costs. But you're right, those have impacts very close to home. The proposal for Mayflower, sorry, my cat wants to join the interview. So the proposal for Mayflower of sending the cable up through the Seconic River with a landing in Portsmouth and a short jaunt across land, I think that it's important because we need to have like that regional renewable energy source. And we also need to make sure that any of those negative impacts that we're compensated for as a state and as municipalities. So I think as these developments move forward, they are industrial scale, they will have impacts. And so I think that it needs to be one of those things where we're paying attention to what's going on and that we're made sure that we're compensated. There's those underground cables coming up the Seconic, those, that impacts like the fisheries and things that can happen in the bay. So, so I'm watching it very closely, aware of what's going on. I know some of it's happening through the Energy Facility Siting Board, and there'll be additional conversations around that through the Coastal Resource Management Council as well, moving forward.
Dawn, I wonder when I take a look at climate change, I took a look at the energy sources, but I wonder if we are paying enough attention to land use and whether or not our cities and towns are taking a look at proper zoning and planning to really project for what maybe some future challenges. I guess that's the best word I can use.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very astute observation. There's definitely challenges around that. I think that the conversation about renewable energy siting has been a hot topic at the General Assembly for the past couple of years. As we're trying to get more renewables into our grid, we want to make sure that we're not cutting down forests and like leveling green space in order for that to happen. So one of the pieces of legislation that's been up for consideration is how do we kind of use like a carrot and sticks approach to direct those renewable energy projects to land that has been previously disturbed. So old industrial sites, old brownfields, et cetera. So yeah, but I think it's definitely an ongoing topic and an ongoing concern. And I think there's some of the communities too have done just outright bans on solar and things like that. So it's kind of again, it's a hot topic at the General Assembly, and it's going to take a lot of work to put forward the right policy, I think, from a state level.
And one of the reasons that we were bringing this up with you, for those that don't know, because I didn't go do a completely proper intro, but you're chairwoman of the Senate Committee on Environmental and Agriculture, member of the Senate Committee on Judiciary, and member of the Senate Committee on Rules, Government Ethics, and Oversight. Those are some pretty big appointments over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think I've been really happy with the progress we've made on environmental legislation in the past 2 years. I know the environmental groups called it the best 2 years of environmental policy making in the state's history. So I'm very proud of that. We worked hard in the Senate, on that committee, oversaw a number of issues, and we're able to move a bunch of things forward, including limiting PFAS, so that forever chemical that started to make the news and kind of being more in like common knowledge. It's a toxic chemical. It exists in like firefighting foam and other chemicals. And we know that it's in our waterways, and it was in our food packaging. So we passed 2 bills related to that, to do testing and monitoring of our water systems to make sure we don't have PFAS in our water, and also to ban PFAS in food packaging, because you definitely don't want to be eating it. So,
Dawn, I want to make a kind of a left turn for a moment,
yeah.
And that's because, of course, you represent Newport and Jamestown, but to get your take on this regionalization referendum that is on the ballot both in Middletown and in Newport.
Yeah, I think that that's something that obviously, like, we passed the legislation through the committee on the regionalization effort. I think the concerns I have a few concerns about it, and I think one of the things is I think the structure of how the school committee is selected, I think, needs some additional thought, because right now, I believe the way that it would work is that basically we would get 3 council members or 3 committee members from Newport and 3 committee members from Jamestown. And then there'd kind of be a wild card of who the next highest vote getter would be. And I'm also a little concerned about the financial, the budgeting is being completely taken away from the school committee, is my understanding of how that would work. So today I'm not going to take a strong stance on it. I think those are 2 things that I've been talking to the administration I've been talking to the school administration to get their thoughts on it as well. But I'm not sold that this is the right path forward. And I also am concerned about the inability to have like single school systems as far as like the buildings themselves. I think that, Middletown has taken a pretty strong stance that they don't want to send their kids to school in Newport. And I think that is a little bit of a challenge when you're trying to set up a regional school system, if one of the municipalities is just overtly saying that we don't want to send our kids to school with those kids. So
is that based upon what we're hearing now, or is that based upon the conversations of maybe a year or 2 ago when Middletown outright rejected the idea of regionalization?
No, I've seen it in their, like, in the Middletown marketing for the bond, for their bond and for their whatchamacallit, for their regionalization question that's on their ballot. Part of the marketing that Middletown has put out is that, well, this isn't going to send Middletown kids to school with Newport. And I think, I think the ideal is that, I grew up in a place where we had county-based school districts. So I lived in Wisconsin and we had county-based school districts. And so, you had like the county-based system that had the administrative oversight. And then you had the individual school buildings that were basically placed in accordance with where the population was. So, I would, if this was clearly something that was going to kind of lead to that, future kind of cost savings and beneficial educational outcomes, I think that would be like an easy, like, yes, I'm on board with this. But again, just with the position that Middletown seems to be taking towards this, it gives me a lot of pause. And I'll say too, like, I've watched as Bristol and Warren, we have a handful of regional school districts. And I talked to an elected official in Bristol about his experience with the regionalization effort. And his advice to me was, don't do it. He said it just pits the communities against each other. Warren and Bristol have been suing each other. And it's just a huge challenge. So yeah, that's kind of where my head's at on it. I'm continuing to listen to the folks who are advocating for it. And listening to voters. And I think it's good that it's on the ballot, because I think then the voters will be able to say how they want to move forward with it. But I think that those elements of what the proposal is are important to make sure that folks understand.
My biggest takeaway over the last couple of weeks of interviewing candidates in Newport and Middletown, the majority of candidates I have spoken to for Newport School Committee as well as Newport City Council, and I've talked to almost every candidate, they all can find reasons to reject it. When you get to Middletown, everybody has a reason to support it. It's completely different than the Rogers bond, because I feel like everybody I've spoken to so far, and I think I've spoken to everybody but two on Newport City Council, you can find reasons not to support it. People need to consider that and ask questions and listen to the interviews of why each of them. But it's just been a little alarming for me to hear so many school committee candidates say that my role is to do the best thing for Newport school students, and I don't support this. I don't think this is the best thing. I think that is, a headline. So.
Yeah, and I think there's elements of a longer and larger process, and I think when this was on the ballot like a few years ago, like the question was, do you want to enter into dialogue, with the other municipality about regionalization? And I think that was the one that Newport said, yes, let's talk about it. And Middletown said, no, go pound sand. I do wonder if the question was instead that, like, should we enter into this conversation so that we could have like a longer running series of public forums and discussions? I wonder if the kind of sense of this would be a little bit different, because the concern of folks that, like you said, if they're concerned about the best outcomes for our students and not hearing the educational benefits coming to the surface, raises some concerns.
Dawn, I would think that some of the urgency is based upon the finances, right? People thinking that some of these incentives would run out, but now we have yet another bond on the statewide bond issue that presumably would lead to the extension of some of these incentives.
Yeah, so we have the question to the school. You're right. There is question 2. There's the school bond, and I think that the reason that we're doing another school bond is the same reason we did the original school bond, is because all of the school infrastructure in Rhode Island is aging. There's a couple new like East Providence. I've toured their new high school a couple times that they built under the bond structure that
high school is so big it must have taken you days.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful building, really modern, and you can just really tell the pride that folks have in going to school there every day, and the teachers that they have, and this beautiful workplace that they have. I mean, it's no secret that sort of environment, is going to help help both the educational outcome. It's just such a great opportunity for those kids, and we need that. We need all of our schools to be modernized, and I hear that the urgency. But I also think that when there's also in the parallel a dual bond, a bond being floated in Middletown to rebuild their schools, I think that just kind of locks us into this like dual school system for decades to come. So,
Dawn, if people haven't been paying close attention, they probably have missed over the years the pivotal role you have played in Rhode Island history in marriage equality, as well as protecting abortion rights, further protecting abortion rights in Rhode Island. How concerned are you over the decisions the Supreme Court, communications the Supreme Court have made over the last couple of years, and what do you think we need to do further?
Yeah, so I'm very proud to have played that role here in Rhode Island on marriage equality, which we put into state law in 2013, and then we repealed provisions that in state law that were unconstitutional under Roe v. Wade. So, for example, one of the things we repealed in 2019 was the criminalization of patients and providers that we see having gone into effect in various states around the country. So, that's really good news that we're protected here in Rhode Island. And I think that even with the Dobbs decision and the willingness of the Supreme Court to kind of roll back those rights, we are still protected here in Rhode Island. And I think it's really important for Rhode Islanders to understand that, because I know that there's a lot of fear and anxiety around that. But because the marriage equality is codified into state law, the codifying Roe v. Wade was a series of repealing bad statute, and it was primarily a result of repealing bad statutes. But I think, we still need to be vigilant, and I think we need to, in the next session, we have basically what on the federal level, it's called the Hyde Amendment, where you can't use federal tax dollars to pay for abortion coverage. Well, we have a kind of a state level Hyde Amendment here. So, you can be working for the state and need abortion as part of your medical care, but that won't be covered if you work for the state and you have state insurance. That won't be covered if you are on Medicaid because of the state level Hyde Amendment. And we're hearing all of these horror stories now on a national level where, women are having miscarriages. And guess what? The medical procedure, when it's coded for a DNC that women need after a miscarriage, is coded as an abortion. So this this routine healthcare procedure would be banned from being covered. And, that puts, families and patients in financial straits. And so I do think that we need to correct that on a state level.
I'm taking a look and expanding into the whole healthcare area. It's been an area that to me appears to be almost in chaos in Rhode Island. We've had a revolving door when it's come to the director of the Department of Health. We've had a negotiations between Care New England and Lifespan that were halted basically that were rejected by the Attorney General. We've had the heads of both of those organizations announcing that their resignations, and we only have one independent hospital in all of Rhode Island. Where are we with healthcare, and how do we improve the system? I'm not talking from a financial standpoint. I'm talking about from a service standpoint for Rhode Islanders. How do we make this a system we can trust?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, Frank. And I feel like I would win some sort of prize if I had like a silver bullet answer, because I don't think that's being done well pretty much anywhere right now. And the strains on the system as well from the pandemic, that's a huge issue. And you have folks who have been in the healthcare industry for years that have decided, with the strains on the system and their own personal emotional and mental well-being as dealing through the pandemic, have decided to remove themselves from the healthcare industry. So I think we need to be looking at things that are going to help support providers and especially frontline, our nurse practitioners, things like that. So I think providing some, financial support around the student loan issues, making sure that when folks are going to school to become a nurse provider, a nurse practitioner, that they're not coming out in crazy amounts of debt that they're never able to repay. And I think there needs to be an assessment of where the wages are, and make sure that we're level setting the wages at a level that are going to attract people to this profession. Because I think we have a huge shortage of providers across our healthcare system, and that certainly doesn't help. And I've talked to so many people who are, just struggling as they aren't getting their healthcare needs met. And I think addressing those kind of structural issues that we can about, again, on the education piece of it, making sure that folks have support on their educational endeavors, and then making sure that the wages are attracting folks to the industry.
Dawn, serving in the Senate or in the House is long hours away from your business, long hours away from family, friends. What led to your decision earlier this year when you had to declare your candidacy that you wanted to run again?
It is a lot of work, and I joke that it's, we're technically part-time, but it is certainly not a part-time job. But there's been a series of successes that I'm very proud of, that being able to deliver for my constituents. So, the issue around the Airbnb registration, that short-term rental registry, that I think, is really going to help us start to try to dissect and address like the housing crisis. The voting bill that we passed this year, the Let Rhode Island Vote Act, which, is why folks can go today if they want down to city or town hall and go and vote. I passed a domestic violence address confidentiality bill this year that is going to help survivors of domestic violence be able to shield their address when they're participating in civic life, because oftentimes when people are escaping abusive situations, if their address is part of a public database, whether it's the voting database, whether it's a real estate notice, that can put themselves at risk, their lives at risk. So, being able to see those wins motivates me to keep going. And we just had in the news today, the Providence Journal just reported that the utility is issuing that offshore wind procurement without that extra profit margin for the utility. And that was something that I was fighting this entire legislative session to see that that request for proposals for offshore wind being offered without excess profit to the utility and at a great cost savings to consumers. I'm very proud of that. So things like that, again, that helps me going and motivated me to want to throw my hat in the ring for another 2-year terms. And hopefully the voters will have me.
So staying on that vein just a little bit, I took a look at the legislative races, and it appears to me that roughly 30% of the Senate and House races, in most cases, incumbents are running unopposed. Occasionally, there'll be somebody who's a newcomer, but also running unopposed. That seems to be an incredibly high number. How do we motivate people to get interested in public service?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that it is definitely not good when so many folks are running unopposed. Of course, I would be not entirely honest if I didn't say I appreciated that opportunity in 2020 to run opposed, but it's certainly not good. It's certainly not good for democracy. It's a good motivator to make sure you're out talking to voters. But I think, and the thing that I've always said is that, if you're frustrated, and I think so many people are frustrated with the way things are going, I think stepping up and getting involved is the way to counteract that. So I think, in a functioning democracy, it's not self-propelling, right? Like it takes involvement, it takes participation. And so people who, want to make sure that their voices are being represented, I think running for office is a piece of that puzzle.
The other piece is getting out there to vote. And anybody who's watching this, yesterday, the AARP of Rhode Island came out with 72% of voters in the primary were over the age of 50. Certainly we can do better than that. We need, if anybody knows a youth, we need to tell them why it's important to vote, not only in the primary, but also in the general election coming up. There are names and bubbles you fill in that actually do have an impact on your life. You don't have to wait for presidential elections. So hopefully more people get out to vote over the next couple of weeks here.
It's really discouraging when you take a look at globally that in the democratic nations and the participation in elections, we are near the bottom. Our numbers of people coming out and voting are abysmal for all we talk about democracy and about voting rights. People just aren't coming out and voting as they should.
That is true there, Frank. Dawn, is there anything else that we did not get to today? I know we could talk for hours, but maybe, if you get reelected, we can talk when session starts back up about other things. But was there anything else that you wanted to talk about ahead of the general election?
Yeah, I really want to make a pitch for, ballot question number 3 on everyone's ballot this year. That's the green economy bond. There's a couple things on there that are going to be, I think, really important moving forward. One of which is municipal resilience. So I think, it's very important for us to do our energy transition to address climate change, but we also know that we are seeing the impacts of increasing intensity and frequency of storms. So that, and being right on the coast here on the island, having some dollars in that bucket of funding that we can reach out for to make sure that we are doing what we can to protect our coastlines is going to be really important. There's also some brownfield mitigation funding in there, and I know that there's some properties in Newport and Jamestown that could benefit from those funds as well. So I would definitely encourage folks to definitely get out and vote yes on question 3 on the ballot.
Yes, and that is the green economy bonds, $50 million for environmental and recreational purposes, and you mentioned some of them, but there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 parts of that, and it's all broken down. People can see it on vote.ri.gov. They can see their sample ballot. Any of the local questions in Jamestown or Newport, the cannabis or anything else that you had anything to share about?
Yeah, sure. I'll weigh in on the cannabis question. I think that one of that issue on the legalization was one of the top issues that people would ask questions of me. Like when I was running for office, everybody wanted to know where I stood on legalizing weeds. So of course I voted yes on that proposition. And I think that the question is really, again, about whether or not we want any of those local businesses. And I do think it is an opportunity for communities. I think that, the conversations about marijuana use are not the same as they were, 20 years ago. And I do think it is in line with, alcohol use. And so, I would encourage folks to consider it. I mean, all of the same local zoning regulations are going to be in effect on these placements. So it's not as if, all of a sudden we're going to get 100 stores opening overnight. They're still going to have to go through the full vetting of the local process. So I would encourage folks to support that, because I think, a no vote means that we get cut out of the revenue share on that. And I do think that that's going to be, hopefully, the hope is that that's going to be substantial. And so I do think that it would be beneficial to both communities to vote yes on that, knowing that they will be able to work with the local cities and city and town to be able to make sure that those are cited responsibly.
Excellent. Was there anything else? You don't think so? What do people ask you? You said that people were asking you what your take was on marijuana last time. Right now, it must be regionalization.
Yeah, I get a lot of questions on regionalization right now, and I think, but yeah, no, the marijuana question, that was every election. It was like, why isn't that legal yet? Why isn't that legal yet? Yeah. And I have to say too, like, I have a nuanced approach on marijuana, because I do think that. Again, I think it should be regulated, like alcohol. And I don't think that it's in a place where we should just, I didn't agree with the part of the bill that allowed folks to basically walk down the street smoking, because I do think that, I think it should be monitored and regulated. I think it's fine if people want to, do that inside. I just don't necessarily want to be walking down Bellevue Ave, smelling somebody else, smoking. But that was always a good question when I was running for office, and I was like, well, yeah, of course I support legalization. But yeah, so
it will be interesting to see which towns approve it and which do not. No matter where it is, people are going to be able to buy, and it depends upon who's going to get the revenue.
That's right. Yep.
All right, Dawn. Well, we wish you the very best of luck over the next couple of weeks here. It starts today and goes until early voting is through November 7th, Monday, November 7th. And then the big day is Tuesday, November 8th. So we wish you the very best of luck over the next couple of weeks.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to be on with you guys as always.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. That is Senator Dawn Euer, Newport, Jamestown, Senate District 13. You in Jamestown will be, you'll see her name on the ballot, and then the majority of Newport will see her name on the ballot in Senate District 13. Vote.ri.gov. You can see your ballot.
Dawn mentioned that how last time she ran unopposed. Her first time around was quite a contest, and she, I think, demonstrated why people should be involved. She had great determination. She put together a great campaign. There was a lot of competition during the primary, certainly for that race, and we have seen a lot of people who have lacked the endorsement, who have been able to get through that process and win election and contribute tremendously to Rhode Island. And
and Dawn participated in our first and last ever forum that we will host. Because it was a heck of a lot of work, a heck of a lot
I
of
remember that. I remember that well.
Back at the Jane Pickens Theater. Now we do it this way, and we have conversations, and you get a lot more out of it. So we hope everybody enjoyed it. And we hope everybody will go to whatsupnuke.com. You can find this conversation. You could rewatch it. You could share with people. You could also download it as a podcast if you want to take it on the go and hear what Dawn or any of the other candidates have to say. We do have a full schedule of candidates that are coming up. We have 3 today, 6 tomorrow, maybe a couple Friday. I don't know, 10 on Tuesday. The governors next week, the lieutenant governors next week. We have Congressman Cicilline tomorrow. So lots of names and lots of candidates coming up here, Frank.
Yeah, indeed. There's a quiz at the end. I want everybody to get out their paper and list all of the candidates that we've had on the air.
All right. So I'll probably fail that first. So. All right, Frank. Well, thanks. And we will chat with you soon.
Thank you, Ryan.
All right. On behalf of Frank Prosnitz, as well as myself, I want to thank Senator Dawn Euer for joining us today. Again, video podcast available on whatsupnuke.com, our conversation with Dawn, as well as all the other candidates. Thanks for watching.